The crowd gasped when the groom ran out mid-ceremony, leaving me frozen in my white gown, heart splintering under the chandeliers. Cameras turned, whispers swirled, but I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled, because in that moment, I realized something no one else did. His rival, sitting in the front row, was already standing, waiting for my move. And I took his hand. The music still echoed faintly in my ears, even after everything stopped. The pianist's fingers had frozen mid-note, the violinist's bow hung mid-air, and every breath in the hall seemed trapped between disbelief and shock. I could feel every gaze piercing through me like glass shards, pity, confusion, and curiosity all mixed into one unbearable silence. I should have broken down, right? That's what everyone expected, a crying bride abandoned at the altar. But no, not me. Not anymore. I had spent too many years holding back tears for a man who didn't deserve a single drop. Daniel was supposed to be the love of my life. My best friend. The man who swore that nothing, not money, not success, not even time, would change us. We'd met in college, in one of those serendipitous moments that feel like destiny. He was the charming business major who sat next to me during a seminar, borrowing my pen and flashing that easy smile that could make anyone trust him. I fell, slowly but deeply. 6 years later, we were finally here, standing before a sea of friends, family, and people who believed in our love story. And then he walked away. It happened so suddenly that my mind couldn't catch up. His phone had buzzed, once, twice, then again. I remember the faint vibration echoing in the hushed hall. Daniel's eyes darted toward his pocket, his jaw tightened, and his expression shifted from nervousness to something else. Something I couldn't name. He mumbled an apology, not to me but to the priest, and then turned. Just like that, he didn't even make it to the doors before whispers began to ripple through the crowd like wildfire. My mother gasped. My father shot up from his seat, his voice trembling as he called out Daniel's name, but Daniel didn't stop. He pushed through the guests, ignoring every hand that reached out to him. The grand doors swung shut behind him with a hollow thud that echoed through the hall. And then, nothing. Silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest until it's hard to breathe. I could hear my heartbeat, loud and unsteady, feel my pulse drumming in my ears. The priest's lips moved, but I couldn't hear him. My bridesmaids looked at each other helplessly, unsure if they should comfort me or hide me. Someone in the back whispered, "She's been left," and that whisper felt louder than thunder. But instead of breaking, I stood still. My knees trembled beneath layers of satin, but I refused to fall. My father started to step forward, his face pale and furious, but I lifted a hand to stop him. Not yet, not here. I turned my gaze toward the front row. That's when I saw him. Adrian Cole. He was Daniel's business rival, the man Daniel talked about with disdain, the competitor whose company Daniel was obsessed with defeating. I'd met Adrian once before, briefly, at a corporate dinner. He'd been polite, reserved, his words calm and measured, his eyes sharper than his smile. Daniel hated that about him, the quiet confidence, the unshakable composure. I never thought I'd see him again, let alone here, in my wedding hall, witnessing my humiliation. But Adrian wasn't smirking. He wasn't pitying me. He was simply watching, steady, unblinking, his expression unreadable but his eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a long time, respect. And that was what steadied me. My mother rushed to me, her voice low and panicked. "Sweetheart, we can leave. Come with me, please. You don't need to do this." I looked at her, at the tears already forming in her eyes, and realized that if I left now, that would be the image people remembered, the broken bride, the poor woman abandoned. No, I couldn't let that be my ending. So, I took a slow, deliberate breath. My shaking fingers smoothed the front of my gown, the one I had chosen because it made me feel like strength could be beautiful too. I straightened my shoulders and lifted my chin. The murmurs grew louder. Someone whispered, "Is she okay?" Another voice said, "She should run." But I wasn't running. Not anymore. When my eyes found Adrian's again, something shifted. He stood up slowly from his seat, ignoring the surprised looks around him. And then, quietly but clearly, he extended his hand toward me. For a moment, I just stared. What was he doing? What did it mean? Was it mockery, sympathy, or something else entirely? His expression didn't waver, and there was no pity in his eyes. Only quiet courage. I didn't even think about it. My heart made the choice before my mind could catch up. I reached out, and took his hand. The hall gasped again, louder this time. My father froze mid-step, my bridesmaids stared in disbelief, and the guests began to murmur in waves of confusion. The priest blinked, lost for words. But Adrian's hand was steady. Warm, solid. He leaned slightly toward me, his voice low enough that only I could hear. You don't deserve to be anyone's humiliation, Maya. If he walked away, then walk forward. And something inside me broke free. I turned toward the priest, my voice steady though my heart was still pounding. Continue, I said. The poor man looked utterly confused. Miss, are you sure? Yes. My tone left no room for doubt. A ceremony doesn't end just because one person gives up. Adrian looked at me with a trace of surprise, but then a faint smile touched his lips. He didn't argue. He simply stood beside me. And for the first time that day, I felt in control. The priest hesitated, glanced at my parents, then nodded slowly. The music resumed, softer this time, as if even the instruments were uncertain. Every pair of eyes in the room was on us, but I didn't care anymore. As Adrian slipped a simple silver band onto my finger, one he'd removed from his own hand, it wasn't about marriage or revenge. It was about reclaiming myself. About proving that I could still stand tall, still smile, even after being shattered in front of everyone. The moment the ring touched my skin, I exhaled. And for the first time, that breath didn't hurt. When it was done, Adrian leaned close and whispered, "You didn't fall apart, Maya. You rose." I looked at him, truly looked, and realized how strange fate could be. The man I was supposed to marry had chosen to run toward lies. The man I'd barely known had chosen to stand beside truth. The applause that followed wasn't loud, more like a stunned murmur, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had walked through fire, and I was still standing. As we walked down the aisle together, the same path Daniel had fled moments ago, the crowd parted silently. My father looked at me with something between shock and pride. My mother's tears had stopped, replaced by quiet awe. Outside, the sky had turned golden, the late afternoon sun breaking through clouds. Adrian didn't let go of my hand, and I didn't ask him to. The air smelled of roses and rain, and though my dress was heavy and my heart still sore, I felt lighter than ever before. Somewhere in the distance, I heard whispers again, about scandal, betrayal, drama. But beneath it all, I heard something else. My heartbeat, steady now. Strong. And as I looked up at the fading sunlight, one thought crossed my mind, clear and certain. Daniel, leaving wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of the one I was always meant to write myself. They called me the runaway bride who married her groom's rival. The media turned my heartbreak into headlines, my photo into gossip. But what they didn't know was that the man who stood beside me that day didn't just save my dignity, he changed the way I saw love, strength, and myself. Because sometimes, the ending everyone pities you for, is the beginning you've always deserved. The morning after the wedding, the world already knew my name. Maya Patel, the bride who shocked everyone. My face was everywhere, on screens, in magazines, in whispers. Every headline had a different version of the same story. Bride abandoned mid-ceremony marries groom's rival in stunning twist. The photos were surreal. Me, standing tall beside Adrian, the faintest smile on my face while everyone else looked stunned. To outsiders, it looked like revenge. A well-orchestrated act of defiance. But it wasn't. I hadn't planned anything. That moment wasn't born from fury, it was born from survival. Still, the world wanted drama. They wanted to label me as the bold woman who destroyed her ex's pride in front of hundreds. Some even called me heartless. Others called me inspiring. I didn't care much for either. I was just trying to breathe again. Adrian, on the other hand, never once fed into the noise. After the ceremony, he made sure I got home safely. He didn't say much, just offered quiet company, a stillness that felt strangely comforting after the chaos. Before leaving, he said, "You don't owe anyone an explanation. Take your time." Then he left me standing by my doorway, my gown wrinkled, my hair undone, and my heart still echoing with what-ifs. The next few days were a blur. Reporters camped outside my apartment, drones hovered near my balcony, and my phone wouldn't stop ringing. My friends didn't know what to say. My parents worried, though my father said quietly one night, "I've never seen anyone handle pain the way you did." That meant more than he knew. And then, on the fourth day, Daniel showed up. He looked nothing like the man I'd fallen for, his once polished confidence replaced with desperation. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and his hands shook slightly as he knocked on my door. "Maya, please," he began the moment I opened it. "I need to talk to you." Every part of me wanted to slam the door, but curiosity, or maybe closure, kept me still. I stepped aside, wordlessly letting him in. He walked through my apartment like a ghost revisiting his old life. "I made a mistake," he blurted, before I could even ask him why. I panicked. "Lisa, she told me she was pregnant, that she needed me." I thought. He stopped, realizing how pathetic it sounded. "I thought she needed saving." I stared at him, my voice calm but cold. "And I didn't." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. I don't know what happened. Everything was too much. The cameras, the expectations. I wanted to breathe. "So, you left your bride in front of everyone to chase a lie?" I asked softly. "That was your way of breathing?" He froze. The silence that followed was heavier than any words could be. Finally, he said, "She used me. For money. For access. She's gone now, Maya. She took everything she could and disappeared." I should have felt satisfaction, but all I felt was pity. Pity for the man who had everything and still didn't know how to value what mattered. "I loved you," he whispered, his eyes glistening. "I still do." "No, Daniel," I said, shaking my head. "You loved being loved. There's a difference." His shoulders sagged. "I can fix this." I smiled faintly, not out of cruelty, but out of realization. "You can't fix something you chose to break." Before he could say more, there was a soft knock on the door. I opened it, and there stood Adrian. He looked perfectly composed, as if the chaos of the last few days hadn't touched him at all. He glanced at Daniel briefly, then at me, reading the situation without needing a word. "Am I interrupting?" he asked politely, though his eyes carried an unspoken warning. Daniel's expression hardened. "You think you won, don't you?" Adrian's voice remained calm. There was no competition, only consequences. The two men stared at each other for a tense moment. Then Adrian turned to me, his tone gentle again. "Maya, there's something we need to discuss. About your business." Daniel scoffed. "Ah, so this is what it was about, money, power, revenge." Adrian didn't flinch. "Respect," he said simply. "Something you wouldn't understand." Daniel left not long after, muttering curses under his breath. When the door closed behind him, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. Adrian stayed silent, giving me space to gather myself. Then he said, "You don't have to let his mistakes define you. You can rebuild, you know." "I don't even know where to start," I admitted. He smiled faintly. "You already did, when you chose not to fall apart that day." And that's how it began. Not a romance, not yet, but a slow, quiet rebuilding. Adrian started visiting my small design studio, the one I'd neglected during the wedding chaos. He introduced me to new clients, investors, people who saw me for my work, not my story. He never took credit, never asked for gratitude. He was just there. Weeks passed. The whispers died down. The headlines moved on to new scandals. And I started breathing again, really breathing. One evening, as the city lights flickered beyond my balcony, I found myself thinking about that day at the altar. The humiliation, the heartbreak, the choice I made. I realized it wasn't madness, it was freedom. Because I hadn't taken Adrian's hand out of vengeance. I'd taken it out of courage. Out of self-respect. Adrian joined me outside that night, a cup of tea in his hand. "You're thinking again," he said with a small smile. "I was thinking," I replied, "how strange it is that the worst day of my life gave me the best kind of peace." He nodded, his gaze soft. "Sometimes, the storm clears out what we should have let go of long ago." There was a pause, the comfortable kind. Then he added, "You know, I didn't stand that day to save you. I stood because I saw someone who didn't need saving, just a reminder that she still had choices." Those words stayed with me. Months later, I reopened my company under a new name, one that symbolized resilience and grace. Adrian helped me set up an event for its launch. I wore white again that day, not as a bride, but as a woman reborn. When I stepped on stage, I saw him in the front row, smiling that calm, knowing smile. My heart no longer carried the weight of betrayal. It carried purpose. After the event, as guests congratulated us. Adrian approached me quietly. "You did it," he said. "No," I replied with a smile. "We did it." He shook his head gently. "No, Maya, you just finally saw the woman you've always been." And for the first time, I believed it. That night, as we walked together beneath the city lights, he stopped and turned to me. "You took my hand once," he said softly. "Not out of love, but strength. If I asked again, this time for love, would you take it?" The world seemed to pause, like it had that day at the altar. Only this time, the silence wasn't heavy, it was full of possibility. I looked at him, at the man who had stood beside me when I had nothing left, and whispered, "Yes." But this, yes, wasn't about defiance. It was about peace, courage, and the kind of love that grows quietly, rooted in respect, not rescue. As he took my hand again, I realized something simple yet powerful. The day Daniel left me at the altar wasn't the day my life fell apart. It was the day I stopped waiting to be chosen, and chose myself. And in doing so, I found everything I was meant to have.